Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Okay, Mike, I maybe have said this before, but this might be one of the interviews I'm most excited about.
Okay.
Do I say that frequently? I say that with every new interview.
I think you say that with every interview, but it's appropriate because we are at that moment. We are the most excited to talk to a new guest because we enjoy hearing people's stories and understanding them a little bit better.
That's true. Well, I am really excited about today's interview. So we have a Purple Life here today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, should we refer to you as perhaps like P Life or do you like
just Purple?
Yeah, Purple. Miss Life.
I like P Life. It's like my rapper name. Most people call me Purple, but you could do whatever.
Like Mrs. Purple. Or Miss
married,
Purple. Sorry, Miss Purple. Yeah, so we're so excited to talk to you. You are somebody that both of us have followed, off and on. Like there's so many people in the community off and on. And then I didn't realize you were from Atlanta until I learned this more recently, but you were in Decatur, which is very close to where I live in Atlanta. And I started seeing you. I think you've made this joke, but your Instagram account's almost turned into like a food blog, like a food review, which I love. And so I started making some recommendations to you of places to eat in Decatur. I think they were all pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. All of them were wonderful. Thank you so much.
And I was thinking about you because I ate at Raging Burrito yesterday.
Oh, stop it. All right. I'm getting on a flight. I'm coming back.
Let us know when you come back. But anyway, so through that, we started, just chatting very briefly, and it was just, you were very gracious and very awesome to come on the show. So we like to start all of these discussions with, at the very beginning of your life and hear a little bit around your childhood and how you were raised, specifically from like a financial angle, and how you think that impacted your views on money specifically.
Sure. So originally I was raised by a single mom. So as a result, money was tight and we were frugal by necessity. That ended when I was, I believe, 8 and she remarried. So less tight, but we were still frugal. My mom, I watched her never buy makeup or fancy shoes or anything. She was like, okay, what is a practical shoe that will last a long time? That's the shoe I'm going to get. She's like, fashion, what's that? I'm like, okay, so this is how you live your life. I like it. So I started doing that, and I kind of had that frugality by necessity in the back of my head, even when money was less tight. Going into college and then getting my first job, I swung in the completely opposite direction because I got my first job in Manhattan, and it was just like Sex in the City. And everyone's like, we got to get $15 cocktails and we have to have high heels and fashion design or whatever. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what we do. And this is how people are happy here. Okay, I'll try it. And then I was like, what did I waste all that money on? So then I once again swung in the opposite direction. And this coincided a little bit with when I learned about FIRE from my partner and decided to start the journey. So that was perfect because then I was analyzing my spending, thinking, does this actually make me happy? And if it does, I kept it, or I figured out how to do it cheaper. Like I love first class flights. So now I travel hack them. And if it didn't make me happy, I cut it out of my budget. And that's where I am. Though, since retiring, I have once again swung in another direction because now I don't check my budget ever. I just spend money.
How's that working for you so far?
Really well. I checked it and I was like, I should check because I feel like I've been throwing money out the window. And so I'm going to look at it and be like, oh no, I need to pull back. And I was like, no, I'm still on track to spend 20K this year, despite moving every month and flying all over the country and laying on beaches and eating everything in Portland, Maine and Decatur, Georgia. So yeah, that didn't work at all. I'm just like, I guess I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
That's an interesting point. And I think it sort of addresses a common myth that people have about cutting back some lifestyle expenses would be a constant lifelong struggle. And I think you would agree, and it sounds like you're living that once you have cut things out that don't add value, there's no pressure to add them back in. And then you are comfortable living that life and you don't need to work really hard to maintain that spend. It just becomes what makes you happy.
Yeah, maybe I've brainwashed myself, but basically after I cut out all the things that I realized didn't make me happy or swapped them out, like I learned that I prefer having people over for dinner parties instead of having a huge outing with 10 people. So then we have more food and more wine and whatever you want. And we can stay there for 6 hours instead of being like, okay, next, get out of here. So that kind of stuff. Like I am happier, but somehow it's cheaper. So it's really weird.
That's great. Now, I read that you were also a third generation early retiree. So
That's
you
true.
have it in your blood. So what did you see from your mom retiring early and your grandparents retiring early?
Well, my mom retired when she was 55, and that was 7 years ago, I think. And that coincided with the year I got serious about financial independence. So it's possible that me seeing her having so much fun, I was like, and how do I get a piece of this? So that was part of it. But like I said, growing up, super frugal. So overall, it was kind of easy for her to do that, even though she has things that I don't have and don't want, such as kids in a house or 2 houses. She has a rental property, cars, etc. So if she was able,
It's funny when you talk about your mom having things you don't want in kids when like you're her kid.
she jokes that I'm her mother. So based on how we act together,
Sorry,
fair point. And so, yeah, frugality got her there. She didn't actually invest in stocks until she was 40 and she still retired at 55. And then my grandparents retired from the military at 50. So they actually didn't call it early retirement. It was just, leaving the military, and that's what you could do.
That's awesome. With your mom, was it a very thoughtful approach that she wanted to retire earlier than people typically do?
Yes, it was very thoughtful after she saw her parents retire at 50 and told me she was loving that my grandmother could come help take care of me when I was born for months at a time because she wasn't working, and help her family, which she loved to do, and do whatever she felt like. So my mom was like, now I need to get me some of that. I feel like this is just a cascading effect. Like we each get jealous and then we want to do it. But yeah, that's what happened.
That's cool. There's often things around, every generation getting a little bit better at something more, more people in your family going to college, whatever it might be, but bettering themselves. But it's fascinating that it almost sounds like your grandparents might have retired earlier than your mom, it sounds like, but then you're even, more aggressively bucking that trend. So it's an awesome family legacy to have. Okay, one of the things that I love about you in the financial independence blogging space and your blogging and in social media is you are very transparent about your income, net worth. Like you share you're anonymous about your identity, but you share full details of everything, right? Like how much money is, in your bank, or how much what your net worth is, excuse me. And you've shown what that growth has looked like over the years. So I love you have I love how I'm telling you this, like you don't know what's on your own blog. But for our listeners' context, you have a post where you actually show your net worth by year and the growth of it. And you grew from $5,000 in 2011, net worth $5,000 to $600,000+ in 2020. What are the key things that you feel like got you from that, 5,000 to 600,000 in less than 10 years?
Job hopping and domestic geo arbitrage. Like I mentioned, I started my career in New York City, and I changed jobs almost every year. And in doing so, I got a 20K salary increase almost every time, promotions like every other time. And at least in marketing and advertising, in my experience, I know you also have experience at this, that was the easiest way to get a salary increase. And it also worked out because I was at times either being laid off out of my control or I was escaping a toxic situation. So it worked out really well. And then the domestic geo arbitrage, I moved from New York City to Seattle, and just the difference in rent and taxes between those two places without me having to change anything about my lifestyle cut my spending in half.
It's crazy. And your spending cut in half, but your salary didn't also, I assume.
No, one of the reasons we chose Seattle is because they pay Manhattan salaries.
That's awesome. So it sounds like Seattle was a very thoughtful, strategic choice of what else about Seattle? I'm just curious.
Sure. We had a whole spreadsheet about it. So closeness to international airports, natural beauty, walkability, because like I said, I don't want to have a car. What else was on that list? Salary prospects for me and my partner. I think cost of living was on there. Gut feeling was on there, so not very scientific. But
it's probably the most important one, though.
That was it.
Hearing you talk about your career progression, your spending, your earning, where you want to live, it sounds like you have lived the most intentional lifestyle of anybody we've talked to. It sounds like you had justification and logic and for all of these things that you made big decisions about. So has there been anything, so you mentioned gut, has there been anything that's been like a primarily gut decision that wasn't so thoughtful or intentional perhaps?
I've never thought about it like that. Moving to Seattle, it did check all the boxes, but also in the end, I came out with like 10 out of 10 gut feeling. What if we just moved there? So like the data backed me up, but also I was like, I just came from there for a weekend and I loved it. So can we move there?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So one of the things that one of many things that I'm fascinated about with you is how low you've gotten your cost of living. So Mike and I talk a lot about what my family of 5's cost of living is, which is on a good year about $80,000. Mike's is you're like half that, right? A little more.
Yeah, like $50,000.
Yeah, and that includes a good bit of like travel and things. And both of our mortgages are paid off, so keep that in mind with those numbers. But I'm fascinated by. You have really gotten your cost of living down very low. I would love for you to share. And I just the reason I want you to go into this is I think it shows just how little you truly need to live off of and how you can be happy with that. And so I'd love for you to kind of just walk us through like what it costs you to live for a year and what are the key things you've done to keep that so low?
Sure. So I actually did not memorize this. So let me just pull up my spending information from, let's do 2019, since that's a more normal year. 2020, I didn't leave. So I didn't even spend $16,000 in 2020 because I didn't do anything. So let me find this.
And just for people's context, you are in a long-term relationship, but you guys keep separate finances. So that amount you're quoting is, for one person.
Correct. One person, no kids, no pets, just me eating my way across the world. All right. So in 2019, I was living in Seattle and I spent over the year $17,896. And I was upset about it because I spent $181 more than in 2018. I guess with inflation, that's not bad.
That is the value in measuring these things, though, because you have something to compare it to, and you have something to, you just have a goal. And if you're not measuring things, it's really hard to improve them, in my opinion. So what's in, can you roughly kind of walk through like what's in that $17,000? What don't you spend money on that you think many people do?
I'll just go down the list of caveats again. So no house, no kids, no cars, no pets. What else do most people have? All the insurance that's needed for all those things.
That's a great point.
I think that's about it. But what I actually do spend money on, I broke it down in my annual spending post that I do every year in December. My monthly bills were 64% of my budget. So just like straight stuff in Seattle, living next to the Space Needle with a gorgeous view. And I paid about $900 a month for rent, but that's with my partner, so double it. However, my entire plan, we both, for our financial plans, made them assuming that we will break up because we're logical.
So I was just going to use that word, logical, intentional.
Intentional in our relationship. So if we were to break up, I did the research beforehand, and a studio in Seattle costs about what half of our one bedroom would cost. Though also, if we weren't together, I probably wouldn't need to be in the middle of Seattle, but that's a whole other thing. But I just wanted to make sure that if it was the case and I still need to be in Seattle, I could sustain myself just by myself, even with the economies of scale that living together and splitting internet does. So that was rent. And then at this time, I had a Republic Wireless phone plan, which was about $26 a month. I'm now on Google Fi for $30 a month, I believe. Internet was $25 a month. That is split with my partner. Electric, $15 a month, split with my partner. Electric is quite cheap in Seattle. We have a lot of dams. Water, sewer, gas, $26 a month. Transit, $8 a month. That was the other thing. I like to walk everywhere. I used to take an Uber every once in a while if I was tired, but really I love walking. And so I'd walk across the city if I wanted to. And if not, I'd take a bus or, like I said, hop in a car. But yeah, I hear transit costs for others are a little higher than the $8.
So where did you go with that $8 trip? I'm assuming that was like one round trip.
No.
Must have been important or a long drive.
Well, that's what, like 4 bus rides in a month. So that sounds about right. Otherwise, I just walk because we did live in downtown Seattle. There was nowhere I couldn't walk to. Also, I worked remotely for 4 years, even before the pandemic. So I didn't need to have commute costs on top of that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I know we've used the word intentional a few times, but just all of your decisions are very intentional to what matters to you, and also happens to be pretty frugal, right? In terms of, I've seen you write about owning a home, and Mike and I have talked about this too. Owning a home is not a financial decision. It's not an investment. It is a lifestyle decision, right? If you want to be in a certain neighborhood and have the space for kids or whatever, but it's not financially advantageous, right? If you really did the math, which we've done, you often will lose on your own personal home, perhaps different for an investment property. But so anyways, I just am like fascinated by the intentional choices you have made and the payoffs that you have reaped as a result of being able to get your costs of living so low.
I'm curious about your spending relationship with your partner, because I think everybody who who's in a serious relationship and shares some sort of expenses as far as lifestyle knows that there is always some sort of conflict. Even if you're talking about $25 internet, somebody's going to have a differing opinion about that sort of thing. So can you share a little bit about maybe what some of the challenges are? How has that evolved over time?
I guess the main challenge would be how we split things and keep it easy, because we do have completely separate finances. So I don't have any say in his money and he has no say in what I do, which is how we like it. So we created a spreadsheet. So if I pay for the next month's Airbnb, I just throw it in the spreadsheet and he knows how much money he owes me. And then if he gets dinner, he also puts it in the spreadsheet and it subtracts from that original amount. And we go back and forth like that to make sure that everyone gets what they are supposed to. But we don't really have conflicts simply because we do our own thing. And like $25 for internet is whatever. Also, I do intentionally try to keep things like that low. I would call the internet company every single year and say, we're going to leave unless you keep giving me the promo rate. So that was a stressful conversation, but I did it. But he was like, if you don't feel like doing it this year, we can just pay the non-promo rate. And I'm like, absolutely not.
No way.
So it's kind of like in the opposite direction. We're getting mad at the world, not at each other.
I like it. How did things evolve with the two of you together, specifically on your desire to retire early? And is he in the same camp? I know he's still working and you've recently retired.
Yeah. So he introduced me to the idea in 2013, and then I ignored him until 2015 when my mom retired, and I was like, oh, wait, what was that thing you said? I should look into that. My bad. So yeah, he's been on the path. He's still on the path. A main difference between us is I've never really enjoyed the base tasks of my job in marketing. However, he's a programmer and he does that for fun on weekends. He just makes stuff. And I'm like, I don't market for fun. What is this? So he's not really in a rush. He likes his company. He likes his job. Obviously, it's fully remote. He can do whatever. So no rush there, but I couldn't really live the life I wanted while working the jobs I had.
I hear you on that. You've also brought him along. So when you say you couldn't really live the life, so you're now living the life you're wanting, which we'll get more into in a minute. But he's tagging along. And how's that working in terms of, like you have more time than he does, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's working well. I mean, we've been together for 12, 14 years. I don't know. But over that time, we've both been fun employed for longish stints. I think he was off for almost all of 2019. So like we've had times where one of us is not working or the other isn't. And so we kind of know that rhythm. We don't necessarily expect the other to like suddenly take over everything because you have time. Like, no, they deserve rest too, or they got their own stuff to do. Yeah, so we've kind of figured it out. I do try to, like, if I see a dirty dish, I'll do it while listening to my podcast if he's on a conference call or whatever. But it's not really that big of a deal.
Oh, that's good. Did you say fun employed?
I did.
I've never heard that term before, but I love it. Where did that come from? I'm just curious.
I have no idea, but I've been saying it for like a decade. I don't know.
Is that because it's not so bad to be unemployed?
Yes.
Yes.
Also, I would usually intentionally quit. And if I was laid off, I'm like, great, I'm going to the beach. And then usually I'd freak out HR because I'd be going in smiling. And they're like, what's wrong with this woman?
Yeah, that's so
we're laying her off. I'm like, awesome, bye.
I've had to lay off a lot of people over the years in my job. And I can imagine it's always a lot better when people take it well. But I'm not sure that I've ever had someone that's like excited, and so it would throw me off a little bit. I'd be like, what?
Yep, that's me.
So if you were smiling and laughing on your way to HR to go get fired, what were your emotions like when you decided to like formally quit and retire?
Super excited.
Sounds like it.
But I tried to keep it under wraps.
Did your company, before you get into that more, did your company, whoever you were with at the end, did they know that this was your goal and any idea, or was it just a complete surprise?
So I went back and forth on this. Originally, I was going to tell my whole company, hey, I'm retiring. I know no one's asked how old I am, so you can start guessing, but I'm 30. Just kidding. And I'm going to go. And if anyone wants more information on how I did that, let me know. Bye. But over time, my company kind of morphed into a monster I did not recognize. And so it was more like, I'm just going to keep this to myself and tell a few colleagues who are actually friends, and I'll help them set up their 401ks and understand investing and invest in their first trad IRA and do all that fun stuff. But the rest of y'all, goodbye. So I did that. And then I didn't tell my boss. However, we were having a goodbye lunch on my very last day. I gave a month notice. And I accidentally let it slip that I was retiring. So now he knows. And it was kind of funny because he had shared his early retirement plans with me. Well, yeah, quote unquote early, about where my mom was, 55, I think he's going to retire at. It was still a couple of years away, but we were talking about that. And he wasn't even surprised. So I am very bad at stealth fire, I guess. I should probably stop talking about investments all the time. But yeah, it was sweet.
So back to kind of what I know, I changed the subject a bit to what Mike was saying. What did it feel like right after you did it and, in the first few weeks and months, like, what was it like?
It was awesome. It felt really nerve-wracking when I was doing it, specifically quitting, because I'm a pessimist. So I was imagining worst case scenario. I'm going to give a month notice. He's going to be like, F you, please leave now. I never want to speak to you again. Of course, he did the exact opposite. And it was like, oh no, I'm so sad. If you want to come back in any capacity at any time ever, come back. I will give you money. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That's nice. And then we had the whole month, and then I transferred all my projects and I left. And the last meeting I had, the CEO was like, you're coming back, right? And I was like, bye. Yeah. So that's what happened. And then the following months were not what I originally imagined, because it was 2020 and I had all this travel, international travel booked, that I sadly had to cancel to Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and Thailand. So instead,
you even already had it booked.
Mm-hmm. It was sad. But it's all good. We made it through the pandemic almost. We're going to be okay.
You'll get to do it soon.
I will. Well, Australia's closed until like 2023, but one day I will get there. Anyway, so instead I moved into a tiny house with my partner in rural Georgia. So not exactly hanging out in a villa on the Great Barrier Reef. It's a different dream, but it's a nice dream. Yeah. So yeah, it was much slower start to retirement, which was cool though, because then I was like, okay, I'm going to sit here, think about what I want to do next. And then I suddenly was interested in birding, and I decided that I wanted to try NaNoWriMo, and I succeeded with that. And then I was like, I want to read a nonfiction book a week in 2021, and let's do that and just see where the world takes me.
You know, in addition to what you just shared, what are your biggest observations and learnings since retiring? So it's how long has it been now?
Math. Almost a year.
Okay, about a year. And you were, just to give our listeners context, you were 30 when you retired.
Correct.
It's been about a year. Maybe you're 31 now.
Yes, I am.
And
Maggie could also do math.
I'm also really good at math. But like, what are the biggest observations and learnings? You know, what do you have all this wisdom now that you can put upon us?
I don't know if it's wisdom, but my main goals were to get better at sleeping, because I've sucked at sleeping my entire life. I have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, getting up and not being bleary-eyed. I was not able to nap before retirement. I would try it and then I'd be sleepy and grouchy instead of refreshed. So all of that's changed. I go to bed when I'm sleepy. I wake up when I feel like it, and sometimes not when I feel like it. But if the ocean is calling me and the sun's rising, the birds are chirping, I'm like, it's time. And then if that's the case, like I keep waking up at 5 a.m. because that's when the sun rises over the ocean here. And if that's the case, then I take a nap like I did today. So I feel a lot more rested. I feel like I'm fixing that sleep debt that's happened over the last decade or so. And that's awesome. I'm also just more present. That was another goal of mine, because when I was working, jobs are very important. And it was always drilled into me that was important. And marketing is kind of nonstop, at least where I was in the levels of my industry. So I was never fully present, ever. Like weekends, vacation. Nope. I was on a beach in Vietnam looking at the waves and thinking about how to solve some project thing for my client. And I was like, seriously, the 2 weeks I have off and I can't even actually be here. I flew halfway across the world and I'm not even here. So yeah, I wanted to be here. And since then I am. Like I mentioned, I was just watching the waves today. That's how I started getting interested in all these random topics like birding. I could identify most local birds now, sometimes by bird call and sometimes visually, which is ridiculous. And I never noticed that birds are different. And I've been to this place in New Hampshire my entire life because we have family here, and I've never noticed the gorgeous birds that are everywhere. I was just like, it's a bird call and it's annoying. Can you please be quiet? Like I'm trying to work. But now it's just fascinating. So yeah, being really present, fixing my sleep. My curiosity is back also. I went to Montessori school, and since Montessori, I feel like it's been crushed out of me through traditional high school, college, and then working. I was always so tired that I was never curious about anything. Or I was like, I should look that up one day. Why does that happen? But then I never had the time to actually look into it. So that's how I've started learning about trees and how they communicate with each other and all this other random stuff. So yeah, I'm basically a child. I nap and I'm curious, and that's all that's going on.
And you like looking for animals outside.
Yeah, also like a child. I love it.
Yeah. My dad is a big bird watcher, and he travels all over the world to go look at birds, and he keeps a life list.
Yes.
I think that's a thing for birders.
What's a life list?
It's like a list of all of the unique birds you've seen in the wild across over your life.
Do you have one of those? Purple?
Of course I do.
P-Life?
And it's in an app. Yes.
Nice.
Oh. So you got to get your dad on the apps, Mike.
Yeah. What number are you at now? Not that I know what.
Let me check. I think it was. So I just started. So don't judge me. But I think
I don't know what a good number is. I can't remember what my
mine's
dad
at like
says.
3.
Yeah.
There's a red bird, a blue bird, and all the other birds.
You gotta know the names or it doesn't count.
And loud bird.
Yeah. There's a bird that keeps running into my window.
Oh no. It looks like I've seen 59 unique birds since I started.
Wow.
All right. So do you have a target now?
No, that's the other thing. I don't want to have I'm
Goals.
over goals, maybe because of work.
Yeah, that's interesting.
No metrics. Let's just see what happens, and I'll go with the flow.
I love that you went from tracking your net worth to tracking the bird count of how many species.
I still do both.
Well, yeah, I know. It's just the juxtaposition of being so focused on one number and now having time to track how many birds you've seen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love your learnings of, you're getting better at sleeping, you're more curious, you're bird watching. I love that you're more present too, because I think that is something we can all recognize. Just that it's hard to be present when your mind is pulled in a lot of different directions. I don't know where I was going with that. Speaking of being present, I can't even continue a thought these days.
I think you just wanted to rattle off some compliments. I'm not sure that had a real purpose to it.
You're awesome. P-Life, you're awesome.
Thank you.
Let's kind of transition to a different type of question. If you were to talk to a group of kids about money, what do you think would be the most important message to instill in them in a young age? So pre-high school, let's say.
That money, when you're an adult, isn't paper. It is the life that you've given for that money. So spend it accordingly.
I like that.
And I can't take credit. That's from Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez.
That sounded familiar.
Mm-hmm.
What else would you tell those young kids?
Just what wisdom?
P-Life wisdom,
No, keep it simple. And then maybe bother your teachers until they add how to do a budget and your taxes to a high school curriculum.
Yes. It's a big miss in the current curriculum of high school and college, honestly.
Yep. And the dangers of credit cards. Maybe I'll just write this curriculum.
Could be. Speaking of that, are there any projects or new things, kind of like bird watching, that you're most excited and energized about right now that you're getting into?
Not really, besides the ones I've mentioned, which are reading a nonfiction book a week, writing on my blog. I still currently do that weekly, though time's coming up where I will reassess if I stop or not on my 1-year retirement anniversary.
Stop altogether or stop the weekly commitment?
Just, I don't know. Yeah. All of it. Either change the cadence or keep the cadence or quit. So I'm just going to decide if it's something that I want to keep in my retired life or if it's distracting. Currently love it, but we'll see what I say in October. That's the anniversary of it. Let's see. I feel like those two things take up a lot of time. And then traveling. So we move about every month and we're planning how to do that in advance, booking everything. Also learning about every new place we go. I read the entire Wikipedia entry of the new city or state we're in, learn some weird facts, which I do include in my monthly recap in a section I call Fun Facts Nobody Asked For. It's my mom's favorite section of every recap. And just exploring what every new state is, because like I mentioned, I've never been present even in ones that I've been many, many times.
thank you so much for joining us for the discussion. I know we said this at the beginning, and I probably said this to you and or Mike a million times, but I am incredibly inspired by people who take the plunge earlier, right? And are not afraid. It's funny, you made a comment earlier that you say you're really pessimistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because you've taken this like big, bold leap that it feels like requires optimism, right?
Well, I've taken it with like 97 contingency plans.
Yes, that's true. We'll put
That
a
sounds
link.
smart, not pessimistic.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Thoughtful. We'll put a link in the show notes, but one of my favorite blog entries you have is where you talk about how you came up with the target of $500,000. And even when you think about like, talking about pessimism, like it's more like you're really intentional. Like you've thought through all the angles and you've said, look, if this doesn't work out, I can make more money. If this doesn't, I just had it pulled up on my phone. You quoted another blog, which I love. I was just reading to my husband yesterday, where you were saying that I'm gonna butcher it. Let me pull it up real quick. But you were saying he was saying, and you were requoting him something. I thought I had it right here.
5180 or
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
I think it was like your worst case scenario is everyone else's everyday scenario.
Yep. So it was, for context for people, it was your worst case scenario is that you've not miscalculated, but that something unexpected happens. You have a big medical thing, whatever, and you have to go back to work. But you going back to work in 5 or 10 years is everybody's everyday scenario, right? So your worst case scenario. I love that. I think your story and how young you've done this to truly enjoy your life. It's probably shocking to many people, but I think to people who are far enough along on this mindset, like Mike and myself, and probably many of our listeners, it's incredibly inspiring, right? Because you've done it, and you've done it earlier and faster, and just very intentional. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Miss P Life, thank you so much for being on our show. We really enjoyed this conversation, and we are so much more impressed with you and your story after hearing you talk about it live than just reading it. So, thank you for this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.